Ever get that feeling? You know, like when you walk into a room and everything's just too much, the lights are glaring,
Hmm.
those smells hit you like a wall and every little sound is amplified.
Yeah.
It's pretty common for folks on the autism spectrum, right? That heightened sensitivity. But what if I told you that everyday things in your home or surroundings could actually be making it worse?
Hmm.
Like literally turning up the volume on your senses.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. The often overlooked connection between environmental toxins and how they impact autistic women.
It's a topic that's finally getting some attention.
Yeah, you all specifically requested this deep dive.
That's right.
So we'll be looking at this article from Cheap ABA called Autistic Women Hidden Dangers of Environmental Toxins.
It really digs into how this specific group might be uniquely vulnerable to things most people don't even notice.
Right, and it's not about being weak or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
more like different bodies process things differently.
Hmm.
Some researchers believe autistic women might have a slightly different blood-brain barrier.
So that's like the security checkpoint between your bloodstream and your brain.
Exactly. Imagine it's like a net with finer mesh.
So more stuff can slip through.
Exactly.
So it's not that they're choosing to be sensitive. It's just that their system is wired to pick up on more things in the environment.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just about being aware of these toxins. It's about understanding how they affect you.
Okay, so let's get specific.
Yeah, let's take pesticides and herbicides, for example.
Okay.
You probably think, oh, that's just on fruits and veggies. I'll just wash them and I'm good.
Yeah, I would think that.
But the thing is, those chemicals can linger.
Mm.
They can linger on clothes, drift in from lawns, even get tracked into your house.
Really?
Yeah, so even if you're not the one spraying, you could still be exposed.
Okay, that's a little unsettling. So what are we talking about here? Just feeling a little nauseous.
Well, it can go beyond that.
Wow.
Pesticides are designed to disrupt the nervous systems of insects.
Right.
But studies show they can also mess with human hormones and neurotransmitters. So for someone with a sensitive system, that could mean headaches, anxiety, difficulty focusing,
Wow.
even seemingly unrelated things like digestive issues or skin
I
problems.
never thought about it that way. It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. Now let's talk heavy metals.
Okay.
You might think of those as a problem in industrial areas.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
But they can pop up in everyday life, too.
I wouldn't even know where to begin looking for heavy metals.
Well, think about older plumbing.
Okay.
It can leach lead into your drinking water.
Oh, wow.
And some types of cookware, especially older ones, can contain heavy metals that can end up in your food.
Really?
Uh-huh. Even things like certain types of paint can be a source.
That's kind of alarming how easily these things can sneak into our lives.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, I have to ask about VOCs.
Okay.
They sound like something out of a science fiction movie.
They do sound intimidating, but they're actually pretty common.
Oh.
Think about that new car smell or the strong scent of some cleaning products. Those are VOCs, volatile organic compounds. They evaporate into the air and you breathe them in.
So things we associate with being clean or new could actually be harming us.
It's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Even that new furniture aroma often comes from formaldehyde,
Hmm.
which is a known carcinogen. And for someone with a sensitive nervous system,
Right.
VOCs can be a real trigger for sensory overload.
So it's not just about the smell, it's about how these compounds are actually interacting with our bodies.
Exactly. And it's important to understand that VOCs don't just smell strong. They can actually irritate your lungs, disrupt your hormones, and even damage your nervous system.
Wow.
And because your body has to work harder to process these toxins, it can lead to that feeling of being overwhelmed and drained.
Okay, so it's all starting to connect. It's like these toxins are piling on, creating a toxic overload situation.
Yeah.
What about mold and mildew? Are those a concern too?
Absolutely. You might think, oh, I don't see any visible mold, so I'm fine.
Right.
But it's not always that simple.
Hmm.
Mold spores are microscopic, and that musty smell in basements or old books,
Yeah.
that's a sign they could be present.
So even if you don't see black spots, there could still be an issue, especially
Yeah.
for someone with a sensitive system.
Right. And those spores can trigger all sorts of reactions: headaches, respiratory problems, brain fog, even mood swings.
Oh, wow.
It's like your body's constantly trying to fight off an invisible invader.
This is all starting to paint a pretty intense picture. We've got all these toxins, pesticides, heavy metals, VOCs, mold, potentially bombarding autistic women on a daily basis. But what does that actually look like? What are the real world effects?
That's where it gets really important to connect the dots between the environment and how you're feeling.
Okay.
We've talked about headaches, difficulty concentrating, feeling anxious or on edge.
Right.
But let's get even more specific.
Okay.
Imagine trying to focus on work, but the air freshener someone sprayed is making your head pound and your thoughts scatter.
Yeah.
Or you clean the bathroom with a harsh product and end up with a migraine that lasts for days.
It's like those times you feel off but can't quite put your finger on why. What if it's not just you being sensitive, but something in your surroundings actually messing with your system?
Exactly. And that's where this knowledge becomes so empowering.
How so?
Because once you start to see those connections, you can start to make changes.
Right. It's not about living in a sterile bubble. It's about taking back some control of what you can control.
Yeah.
So knowing all of this, what can people do to create a safer environment for themselves?
Yeah. Let's look at some practical steps.
Okay.
Yeah. It really is about taking those small steps and building on them. It can feel overwhelming at first, but even making one change can make a difference.
That's a great point. Progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
And speaking of feeling overwhelmed, the article also talks about masking.
Right.
I think that's a really important piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, masking is a huge factor, especially for autistic women.
Hmm.
It's basically this constant effort to adapt your behavior, to fit in with social expectations, often suppressing your natural tendencies. It's like putting on a performance all the time.
So you might be feeling totally overloaded or overstimulated, but you're pushing those feelings down because you don't want to stand out or make people uncomfortable.
Exactly. And here's the thing, masking takes a lot of energy.
I can imagine.
It's like running a mental marathon every day. Now imagine you're already dealing with the effects of environmental toxins,
Right.
which can impact things like focus and sensory processing.
Yeah.
It's like trying to run that marathon with a weighted vest on.
So it's not just about the physical effects of toxins. It's about the emotional and mental toll as well. It's like a double whammy.
Right. And for autistic women who are often socialized to be more accommodating and less disruptive,
Yeah.
that toll can be even greater.
This is making me think about all the times I've felt exhausted after social events or even just being around certain people.
Mm-hmm.
What if some of that is tied to this idea of masking on top of environmental overload?
Yeah, it's definitely something to consider, and it highlights the importance of finding safe spaces where you can be yourself without feeling the pressure to mask.
Yeah.
That could be with close friends, family, a support group, or even just spending time alone in nature.
Okay.
It's about recharging your batteries and giving yourself permission to just be.
I love that you're bringing up the idea of nature. There was something so grounding and restorative about being outdoors away from all the artificial stuff.
Absolutely. And it's not just about escaping toxins. It's about connecting with something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
Something that reminds you of your own natural rhythms.
Okay, so we've talked about the problem, the potential impact, and the importance of self-care. But let's get practical.
Yeah.
What are some specific things people can do to reduce their exposure to these environmental toxins?
Well, we touched on this a bit earlier,
Okay.
but let's dive in deeper.
Okay.
Switching to natural cleaning products is a great first step. You don't have to buy expensive brands. There are tons of DIY recipes online using simple ingredients like vinegar, baking soda, and essential oils.
Yeah, I've actually started making my own all-purpose cleaner with vinegar and lemon peels.
Oh, nice.
It smells amazing and works like a charm.
Yeah.
And what about personal care products? Things like makeup lotion shampoo that stuffs on our skin all day long.
Yeah, that's a big one. Personal care products can be loaded with synthetic fragrances, parabens, phthalates, all sorts of things that can disrupt hormones and irritate sensitive skin.
Oh, wow.
Look for natural, fragrance-free options and check out resources like the Environmental Working Group's Skin Deep database
Okay.
to see how your favorite products rank in terms of toxicity.
I never thought about looking up my makeup on a database. What about air and water filtration? Those seem like bigger investments.
They can be, but think of it as an investment in your long-term health and well-being,
Yeah.
If you're constantly bombarded with toxins in the air and water, it's going to take a toll eventually. Even a simple water filter pitcher can make a difference, and there are affordable air purifiers that can help remove dust, pollen, and VOCs from your home.
And then there's organic food, which I'm guessing ties back to the pesticide issue.
Exactly. I know going all organic can be pricey, but even swapping out a few key items can significantly reduce your exposure.
Okay.
The Environmental Working Group also has a dirty dozen list that highlights the produce with the highest pesticide residues.
Oh, that's helpful. So you can focus on buying organic for those items and save money by buying conventional for the rest.
Right. It's about being strategic and making choices that work for your budget.
Yeah, it's not about being perfect. It's about making informed choices and finding what works best for you.
I love that. It's about taking back some control and creating an environment that supports your well-being.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What do you think are the most important takeaways for our listener today?
I'd say, first and foremost, awareness. Just knowing that environmental toxins can have a real impact, especially for autistic women,
Right.
is a huge step. Second, empowerment. There are things you can do to reduce your exposure and make your environment safer.
Mm.
And finally, connection. Don't go it alone. Find your people, build community, and advocate for change.
That's so powerful. And it makes me think about how often we just accept feeling a certain way without ever questioning why.
That's a really important point. We tend to blame ourselves or internalize things without considering the external factors that might be at play. It's like
Huh.
we've been conditioned to think that if we're struggling, it's our fault.
It's like, oh, I'm just sensitive or I'm just anxious. But what if it's partly your environment that's making you feel that way?
Exactly. And that's why this conversation is so crucial. It's about giving people the knowledge and tools to understand themselves better and create a more supportive world.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with something to think about this deep dive, focused specifically on autistic women. But what about other sensitive groups?
Yeah, that's a great question. Children are particularly vulnerable
Mm,
to environmental toxins because their bodies are still developing.
right.
Their little systems are working overtime to grow and thrive,
Yeah.
and toxins can really throw a wrench in the works.
It's like their bodies are already working so hard just to maintain balance, and these toxins add another layer of burden.
Exactly. And even beyond specific diagnoses, there are people who just feel extra sensitive to their surroundings.
Mm,
Maybe they get headaches in crowded stores or feel drained after being around strong perfumes.
yeah.
These are signals worth paying attention to.
It's like we've all got our own unique toxin threshold, and some of us just hit it a lot sooner than others.
Precisely. And it's not about labeling yourself or getting caught up in diagnoses.
Okay.
It's about tuning into your body's signals
Right.
and respecting your own individual sensitivity.
I love that it's about reclaiming that power of observation and making choices that truly support our well-being.
Yeah.
So, to wrap things up, if our listener takes away one thing from this deep dive, what should it be?
I'd say it's this, what if some of the sensory overload or unexplained symptoms you've experienced are actually due to environmental factors?
Hmm.
It's time to view your surroundings with new awareness and start asking questions.
It's like we've given you a new lens to look through, and even if you don't identify as autistic, this idea of environmental sensitivity is something we can all relate to.
Right.
Maybe you get headaches in certain stores or feel extra drained after cleaning with harsh chemicals. Those are signals worth paying attention to.
Absolutely. It's about becoming an investigator of your own environment. Notice what makes you feel good, what makes you feel off.
Right.
It's all valuable information.
So much of wellness is about connecting the dots between how we feel and what we're exposed to in our daily lives.
Well said. And it's not about living in fear. It's about informed empowerment. You have the power to make choices that support your health and well-being.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. Thank you so much for joining me, and a huge thank you to our listener for requesting this topic.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.